Welcome aboard. You're listening to Flight Plan Quick Consults, your go-to podcast for veterinary insights that are fast, focused, and designed to elevate your practice. I'm your host, Brenda Tassava Medina from Encore Veterinary Consulting. Whether you're between appointments or heading into a strategy session, we've got takeoff ready tips, tools, and takeaways to keep your team soaring. So buckle up as we set a course today for culture isn't a perk, it's a performance driver. Today's panel includes Carol Hurst and Shannon Lovely. Carol, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Brenda. My name is Carol Hurst, and I started out as a credentialed technician straight out of high school. This is pretty much all I've ever known. And I quickly was thrust into a leadership position with only a couple of years of LVT experience under my belt, which I know we all can relate to. And I loved it. And I've been in leadership ever since, for better, for worse. And I got my CVPM in 2016. So turned into practice manager, managed a four-doctor practice, and then dabbled into some consulting before joining with you at Vet Support as a full-time consultant. And now here I am.
And we're glad you're here.
Me too.
And we have the very lovely Shannon Lovely.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Lovely. I am also a CVPM, and I've been in med now for about 30 plus years. I have the pleasure of working with my team at Vet Positive as a veterinary consultant and helping practices with all things leadership development, operations, team communication, workflow efficiencies. But I am super excited to be here today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. All right, we will dive right in. I've got two burning questions today that our listeners want to hear our discussion around. And the first one, Carol, I'll throw it to you. What's one leadership behavior that quietly erodes trust on a team, even when leaders have good intentions?
Oh, there's like at least half a dozen that come to mind, but the one that just really stands out is one that's hard, I think, for all of us, but is especially important for our leaders, and it's admitting mistakes. And, it really sucks that the magnifying glass, as soon as you're put into that leadership position, is pointed directly at you, right? The team sees everything, they hear everything, and that doesn't mean that they're expecting perfection. I don't think that that's what any of us expect. But and it's hard. It's I can feel my own discomfort because I went through this full period where I thought being a leader meant you didn't make mistakes, right? I know all the answers. You come to me and I'm ready. And if I admit a mistake or make a mistake, it means I'm not good or I'm not good enough. And my practice owner, even, he would get to the point because I didn't make a lot of mistakes, but I definitely made some. And he would go, "Oh, there's a chink in your armor," and I'm like, "Oh, like that." It just kills me because the expectation around it is that we don't make mistakes, but we need to make the mistakes to learn and to grow. And we have to admit the mistakes, right? Because if we're expecting our teams to do the same thing, it's going to be really hard when we don't match that expectation.
Yeah, I think that that is an excellent one to bring up because, I think that, hearing you tell that story, it's like, yeah, I can see employees really hesitating to own up to mistakes if they see you make mistakes, but you're just moving
Right.
on and, just not owning it the way that we need to, then it's like I think it becomes I'm going to cover this up because, I
Right.
can't make this mistake, or they're not comfortable or not keeping it psychologically safe for them to learn from mistakes that they make themselves. It's a really good point. What about you, Shannon? What's the one leadership behavior on your mind that quietly erodes trust?
It's funny that you say that, Carol, because I used to get that comment sometimes, "Oh, you are human. You actually do
I
make
know.
mistakes, right?" Um, and it's so true. And to sort of build on that a little bit more, you said something, Brenda, that was like psychological safety.
Hmm.
Um, one of the biggest things that I see in the leaders that I help to train and mentor is inconsistency. Inconsistent communication, accountability, follow through are the things that came to my mind. Um, they don't intend initially to create distrust, right? That's not their first thing that they're trying to do, but in fact, many are trying to be compassionate and flexible. The, the day or the stress level the leaders bring into the practice, people feel uncertain. So, they're like, what are my actual expectations? What do you want from me? Are you going to address this fairly? Do you have your favorites? And uncertainty creates anxiety, resentment, and eventually you'll see disengagement. And, that's not the thing we want to see. But if expectations are unclear, accountability feels personal instead of professional. Um, a strong culture doesn't mean being rigid or harsh. It goes back to my three from the last time we talked: clear, concise, and consistent.
Mm.
So I apply those. What's expected of me? Where do I stand? And that leadership will respond fairly and predictably.
Yeah, I see this all the time too. It's the inconsistency with communication, especially.
Yep.
That's where I see a lot of remarks from employees, that they feel in the dark or uncertain because that communication ebbs and flows. And they're not quite sure where things stand. And that's really hard to build trust on.
It
I
Yeah.
is.
think the favoritism thing stood out to me, Shannon,
Yeah.
because, I don't know that any manager rolls out of bed and says, I'm just going to favor these employees, right? But it's
Yeah,
so much more nuanced than that, right? It's,
it is.
the ones that maybe you were friends with when you got put into that leadership position. So you have that connection already, and you may
Yeah.
not intend for it, but it just kind of happens where, you've got a better rapport. Um, that, that just that just stands out to me is that favoritism.
It does. And you got to know where that line is,
Mhm.
and making sure that we're not seeming like we're picking our favorite employee every time for things, and making sure we have that consistent communication with every single employee. And that kind of comes into my next answer for the next burning question.
All right. So let's hear it with what is one simple, repeatable action leaders can take weekly to build a high trust, high performance team. Shannon.
When we create space for conversation before the problem escalates, they feel seen, they feel supported. That psychological safety that you were referring to, that changes performance dramatically. And I think leaders underestimate how much trust is built through small moments of follow through. So when I walk up to people, I'll say, you know what? I heard you, I see you, and here's what I'm doing about it. And then actually doing those things and having that follow through, that creates that trust. And then they feel respected, supported. It's not just where you build that during a pizza party. It's a weekly thing. So when people feel valued and they understand the why behind your expectations, the accountability becomes collaborative instead of combative. And I see that in high performing teams where there's a high level of trust. I give you a job, I send you on your way, I check in with you halfway through when I expect that to be done because I've been consistent in telling you what I expect and when I expect it by.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Carol, what about you? Simple, repeatable action leaders can take weekly.
So I think I want to bounce off of that kind of idea of connection, and go to something that stems from this idea of the perception of perfection, right? And
Mm.
how when I was in my career, I connected that infallibility, that you don't want to get too close to your team because then there's that perception of favoritism, there's that perception that there's not going to be fairness, and not really seeing the value of those informal connections, right? We talk a lot about performance reviews and coaching and how to coach, but I don't know that we give enough space for how to connect with the team, right?
Mhm.
And just checking in with them on a weekly basis, not where are you at with this training or where are you with this goal, but how are you doing, right? What did your weekend look like? And I know that sounds so simple, but I talk to a lot of leaders that that connection piece, just getting to know their team on just that person to person level doesn't happen because of a lot of reasons, right? It's hard, it doesn't come naturally, we're more numbers focused, it's busy, right? But I think building in time, if there could be anything, just build in some time for weekly connection with your team one on one.
Yeah, Carol, I actually wrote that down, and it's funny that you said that because the questions that I ask when I meet with people one on one, and it's not like you said, it's not always about what project we're working on. It's how are you?
Yeah.
Where are you seeing friction in your day? How can I support you? And what's working well? What should we continue? Because you're the ones on the floor doing the work. So talk to me. Tell me what's working for you.
This conversation reminds me of a book that I read several years ago called 9 Minutes on Monday. And I picked up the book because something on the title or something on the cover really called out with me. I struggle with time management, and I always have as a manager. And so I thought, oh, this is going to help me like with my week and just really, plan out my week a little bit better. What it actually did was it taught me how to schedule intentional time with my team. And, just taking 9 minutes on Monday morning. I actually did it on Sundays because I could go in for 3 hours on Sunday while my daughter was at orchestra. But I would go, and nobody was there. So I got so much done. But on
Hmm.
Sunday, I would plan my week. And it was about, elevating that level of consistency in terms of communication, but being so intentional about, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to spend 20 minutes talking to my inventory manager, just one on one. And it's not out of the blue, but it's like I don't want to miss those moments because that does lead to those inconsistent communications that we've talked about through this episode. It also taught me helped me see the other side of the coin, which was when we have maybe coaching conversations with our team members and we say, okay, we're going to follow up with this. And unless we actually put it on our calendar and hold ourselves as leaders accountable to actually sitting down and following up, those follow-ups oftentimes don't happen. And I
Hmm.
think that erodes trust as well. And so that book really helped me to see intentional scheduling of conversations, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes with my team members, could really help with our connection and the trust that we're building with one another. So, for our listeners out there, I'd love to recommend that book. It really helped me through some of those issues and a little bit with my time management as well. So if you
I love
struggle with
it.
that, pick it up.
I
Yeah.
I love that 9 minutes because when you talk to leaders, everything feels overwhelming because
Mhm.
every task feels like it's going to be this big task. But a lot of the changes that you can make, a lot of the improvements aren't hours and hours every week. It's the intentional 10 minutes here, 30 minutes there that you kind of protect and you make consistent. Like that's where you really see improvements.
Yeah, I agree. I would on occasion on a Saturday go into work, and when I was managing a practice, and I would sit at the front desk with the CSRs and I'd watch them. And one of the ladies, she was my lead. I said, "Why are you doing that like that?" She said, "Because you told us to." I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me that was stupid? That's just not, that's not a good flow." And she said, I can tell you that. And it was a real conversation to say, I too make mistakes, right? And you can tell me when it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to come to you with a whole bunch of ideas, but you're the one doing the work. So tell me what's best for you. And they see you're a real person, right?
Yes. And that's great vulnerability in the moment, you're right?
Hmm.
And it does humanize you. So
It
that's
does.
an often is awesome example of just about everything we've been talking about. It's I made a mistake. Why didn't you tell me about that? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. When you have a healthy culture in your practice, and I always tell people culture is what happens when the leader's not in the room. If if you built a good culture, things continue without you standing over people. And it's the foundation that performance is built on. So if you have trust and good communication, everything improves, and in the end, patient care improves alongside everything else.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, our listeners, for flying with us on Flight Plan Quick Consults. If today's insights helped you climb to new heights, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your crew. Until next time, keep your mission clear, your team aligned, and your practice soaring.